Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank Margaret for inviting me today to speak about my novel, The Sacrificial Daughter. I'm going to start by telling you about my family history, which inspired this story. I grew up in Northbridge, the third of 4 sisters. My father was the son of Lithuanian immigrants, and my mother, the youngest daughter of Irish immigrants. I'm going to focus on the Irish side of my family because that's the side that inspired this story. This is a photo of my grandfather, Timothy J. Daly. He was born in 1876 in Toreen Glen, Ireland, on a property that looks out onto the Skellig Islands off the coast of County Kerry. This is a photo of the ruins of his birthplace, a stone house which once had a thatched roof. Tim was one of 10 children, and when he was 22, in 1899, he decided to join 2 of his brothers in Worcester, Massachusetts. When I visited Ireland in 2014, I asked my cousin Jerry, who lives just above this field, why anyone would want to leave such a beautiful place. He answered, there was nothing for them here. No work, no opportunities. So off to Worcester Tim went, traveling by ship. His brothers were living on Ward Street in the Vernon Hill neighborhood of Worcester, and my grandfather joined them there. He worked at American Steel and Wire for 45 years and retired from there. This is a photo of my grandmother, Elizabeth McElligott Sullivan Daly. I don't know where she came from in Ireland, but I do know that she was first married to Patrick Sullivan and lived in Chicopee. She had 2 or 3 children who died at age 2 or younger from diseases that are now treatable. Her husband died at age 29, and somehow my grandmother found the will to move on. She married my grandfather in 1910, and they had 2 sons, one who died at age 2, and 4 daughters. My mother was the youngest. You have 2 photos there? Yeah. The photo on the left was taken somewhere on Vernon Hill in the early 1940s. My grandmother died in 1941 at the age of 56 from cancer, when my mother was only 17. That's my mother on the far right of the photo, so I imagine it couldn't have been taken too long before my grandmother died. The photo to the right is my grandfather with 3 of his daughters and his grandson, taken long before I came along. My grandfather died when I was 4, and I only have a dim memory of him. But I was fully immersed in the lives of his daughters, all of whom inspired the character of Agnes in my novel. I grew up in the country, but we frequently visited family on Vernon Hill. So my mother was raised by Irish immigrants, and after her mother's death, was sort of taken under the wing of my Aunt Mary, who was like a grandmother to me. Both Mary and Betty, my mother, carried gifts from their parents, a love of reading and learning, and in Aunt Mary's case, a love of writing. She wrote poetry, and somewhere there's an unpublished novel that I really should try to get my hands on and see if it's something I could work with. It's something about a red-headed girl with a club foot in a lighthouse. That's all I remember. They say my grandmother was full of music. She loved to going to clog dances and loved to sing all the old Irish songs. My sisters and I received this musical gift, as did my mother. I've always loved to sing, and I've always loved to read. Singing and books were my passions from a very young age. I chose to follow a musical path when I went to college, and I did a lot of performing over the years. I taught voice students, still do, and general and choral music in the Spencer East Brookfield school system. Although singing was my first love for most of my life, reading was a close second. I also felt a drive to write. I didn't follow this drive seriously until I turned 50, when I took a short story writing class at my local library and subsequently published my first story in a literary magazine. In 2010, my sister and brother-in-law invited my husband and I to join them on a trip to China. They'd adopted a daughter from China 10 years before, and the intention of this trip was to show her the country of her birth. My husband and our almost 20-year-old daughter and I went along. It was an amazing trip, filled with incredible experiences and adventures. When we got home, I found I really wanted to write about it, but I was hesitant to write a memoir piece, thinking I'd have to be too careful about family members' feelings. I'd always wanted to write a novel, and I'd had the idea about writing about a sacrificial daughter, incorporating family stories and personalities into the book. Suddenly, I saw the possibility of creating an interesting story by combining the Irish family on Vernon Hill in Worcester with a trip to China, and the sacrificial daughter came to life from there. Most of the places visited by Mary Ellen, the main character in the novel, are places we visited. Here are some of them. The Forbidden City in Beijing, there's a description of that rooftop in the book. The Great Wall of China, the Terracotta Warriors in Xi'an, and the Panda Bears in Chengdu. Also in Chengdu, we ate a meal at a hot pot restaurant where the young waiter put a chicken claw in our daughter's bowl. She took an empty bowl and covered it so she didn't have to look at it. Our guide later told us that the waiter was paying her a compliment, that the claw is a good luck symbol, signifying that you'll get what you reach for in your life. I included this incident in my novel, and my daughter was not amused. As a matter of fact, she was disgusted, and she only ate white rice. But the rest of us, the adults, thought this was pretty funny, so it was an enduring memory. And that, fortunately, she was using the ladies' room when I reached in with my chopsticks and pulled up the head of a chicken, including a beak and two little beady eyes. So they were. I do mention food in the novel because it's. We went in a restaurant once where you could go in and pick the raw animal waiting in the cooler, or you could go in a restaurant and pick the fish out of the tank. That would be your meal. So very no cellophane packaging, keeping your distance from it in China. The last two photos were taken in Shanghai on our last evening in China. You can go to the last one. The famous street where there is called the Bund, and we were in a rooftop restaurant looking out on the lights of the city across the river. It was a memorable night, and my main character writes about the scene in her journal in the novel as a moment when she realizes this is it, with her hair blowing in the wind, that it's time to make a change. So most of you have read the book, but I'm going to give you a little synopsis about it. The story is about a 35-year-old teacher, Mary Ellen Kelleher, who has lived in a triple-decker on Vernon Hill for her entire life. She lives with her 75-year-old mother, Agnes. Mary Ellen has reached a place in her life where she is beginning to long for independence, to create her own home and live her life on her own terms, rather than staying in the place where her mother and siblings expect her to stay. Just as she's reaching the end of her rope with her mother's expectations and histrionics, a good friend with an adopted daughter invites her to join her family on a homeland trip to China. Mary Ellen sees this as a perfect opportunity to get some space from her mother, and she accepts. In China, she meets two attractive men and forms friendships with another family in their traveling group. The trip inspires Mary Ellen to return home and reach for what she had been yearning for, namely, to live her own life. At the first Sunday family dinner after the trip, she announces that she plans to move out, causing her mother to take to her bed in shock and her siblings to question her sanity. As the story unfolds, Mary Ellen and her mother begin to listen to each other and work towards a solution that's based on love and trust. But life intervenes again, and I'm not going to tell you what happens. I hope that you will read the book. I have copies for sale today if you're interested in buying a signed copy, and I would love it if you would sign up for my newsletter, which has not been created yet, but it's coming. I'm going to do book recommendations of books, maybe bits of short stories, news about upcoming writing and things like that. I am writing another book. It is not a sequel. Several people have asked that, but I've spent a lot of years with these characters, and I'm ready to move on. So I had started this book before I decided to go ahead and publish. The second book, which I don't have a title for, and I have been working on it it takes me a long time to write a book. It was probably 12 years on The Sacrificial Daughter. I think I'm going on 8 years on this one, but I'm not one of those people who just wakes up and says, okay, this is my book, it's going to go boom, 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 let me sit down and write it. I have no idea what's going to happen. I start with a premise, I start with some characters. I have a general idea of what's going to happen, but I don't really, it comes to me as I write. And then I write something and then I walk away from it for a few days and I ruminate over it, and then I come back to it and add something, and that's how it unspools for me.
Do you still have relatives in Ireland?
I do. My cousin Jerry lives there with his family, and there's one of his sisters. I really haven't been in touch since we were there. Rosemary was on that trip too, and I'd like to go back, but
So I noticed your grandmother's name was McGilligan.
Mm-hmm.
That is a name that is very much associated with Kerry. So
Oh, it is.
I think she definitely was from that
Yeah.
area, as well as the other people that you mentioned in your life.
Yeah.
You were saying you didn't know exactly where,
Yeah.
but that is a very Kerry name.
Now I'm thinking that I probably knew that she was also from Kerry, because I never heard it. My mother they always talked about County Kerry, so they must have both come from there.
So is your next book, is it also about, is it based like in Worcester again, or?
No, actually, it's based in Woonsocket, Rhode Island. I don't even know how I came up with it. It's a French-Canadian family. My best friend from childhood, we met on the bus going to kindergarten. We were 4. She was French-Canadian, and her mother was one of 21 children from this family in Whitensville. And so because we were such good friends, I spent a lot of time at her house and vice versa, and ate a lot of the French-Canadian foods. And then we had French nuns at the school that I went to, and I started learning French when I was in first grade, so we had a little session every day, and it was very much a French-Canadian community. So I decided to kind of pull that in. And then there's a part that's in Florence, because I just went to Florence. And so many people have told me that they loved the travel part of this book. And I love to read novels where they travel somewhere and that comes alive, so I wanted to include that. And then after this character gets married, she's going to live in Barnstable on the Cape. And I don't even know where those places came from. I'm familiar. I've been to Woonsocket, but I knew it was a mill town and, kind of the middle class area, and so I made that her roots.
Southbridge is also a very much French-Canadian town.
Southbridge, oh, it is, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot of similarities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in Spencer, I live in Spencer, and it also has a lot of French-Canadian roots. Wow. My father had 2 sisters who, 3 of his sisters got married and had families. He got married and had a family, and there were 2 sisters that stayed at home with my grandmother for years. They just lived in this big old house, and they were beautiful. I've seen pictures of them when they were young. They were absolutely gorgeous, and I don't know what that story is.
So what about your writing process? So do you write every day, or only when the mood takes you, or like how does it work? And
well,
how long do you write for?
I try to write every day, but I don't. It depends on what I'm working on. I'm not particularly disciplined. I started writing this when I was teaching full time, and raising a family and doing performing, and so I don't know, like 7 o'clock at night, if things were quieting down, I'd go in and just write for a while, but I didn't really stay on it. I don't write ambitiously, or I haven't, but now that I'm getting older, and I think I have 1 novel that I've started, and another one that it's like in little vignettes of short stories that I've worked on in my writing group. So I feel like I have 1 more, and let's face it, you got to get cracking.
Do you have an outline for the 3rd novel?
I have some. It's actually it started from a writing prompt. I belong to the Quabog Writers Collaborative. We started out at the North Brookfield Library. Now we couldn't do it during the pandemic, so now we meet at people's houses or whatever. And the writing prompt was barbecue. we were just like, somebody come up with a word. And so I don't know where this came from, but I came up with an idea for a couple going on a road trip, and they're in Amarillo, Texas, and they go to this place called Barbecues, and it has this sign with this Texas, this blonde woman with a sparkly red cowboy hat on, and so I wrote it, and everybody in the group really liked it. So then I wrote another one when they're in New Mexico, and then I started kind of deepening the story as far as their kids have just moved out of the house. They feel like they've been married for many years, but they feel like they're strangers. So they go on this trip to try to see if they can, see if they're actually going to continue to stay together. And I've actually had a lot of fun with that. But I've decided to just do things sequentially now. This was the first one that I had written, and I decided, okay, it's time to just take it out and focus on it. And now I'm doing that with my next one. And so the travel story is, I'm not going to work on it till I'm finished this other one. Some people work on several things at once, but I think the result of that is you don't really get anything done.
It's missing when that happens.
Yeah, and you get your stories confused, and something has to take off in you to have the energy to write, And if you're thinking about one story, you're not going to start really getting the other one together, I don't think. Well, I think I just kept on going back and saying, no, it's not good enough, it's not good enough. And I had it professionally edited, and then I queried it to agents, because everybody says that's the way to sell fiction. And I got, some polite letters, not right for our, don't give up, it's good, but don't quit your day job. No, they didn't say that. But so then I just let it sit for a while, probably 3 years. And then I went back and I did another rewrite, but it wasn't edited again professionally until it got to the publishing company. It was published through White River Press, which is a hybrid publishing company, which means that I have to pay for the book design, the professional edit, and the proofreading, but I get a lot of say. Most people do not. Most people who publish with, small publishers they don't get to choose their, if they want to change your title, it's changed. They want to change your book cover, it's changed, or they say this is your book cover and you don't get to say anything about it. And I thought, I've spent all this time, I'm used to micromanaging everything. I'm gonna do the same thing with my book. And so I got it the way I wanted. I love the way the inside looks. I love the cover. I think the editor was amazing. Her name is, her last name is Stone, and she writes novels about, I think they're sort of kind of cozy mysteries. I don't know if they're really cozy, but set in Martha's Vineyard. And of course, her name is going to pop into my head in a couple of seconds. But anyway, she told me after I wrote to her to thank her for the work she did. I really liked what, I think she really helped polish it up. She told me that she's published 24 novels of her own. So I realized I was in really good hands for that, to work with somebody like that. That's at the end. There wasn't a ton of editing, but there were things that she picked up on, like things that happened in China, something about the hotel room, and she said, you know what, this doesn't make sense. This never would have happened, and I was like, oh, no one else. I'd had lots of people read the book, nobody had ever picked up on that before. So a lot of helpful things, and she taught, she rearranged my sentences in a way that helped me to see that was the way I should be writing it the first time, so hopefully the next time around there'll be less editing.
Did you find it having colleagues in the writers group helpful as well? Is that a good process? I'm thinking for would-be writers, is that a good way to start?
Yes, that's a wonderful way to do it. If you have a good group, and it's taken us a while to get a good mix of people, but we're all friends now, and we're very, we speak very truthfully to each other. We're not, nasty or anything, but we're respectful, but we don't let people get away with stuff that we're like, we say things like, women aren't going to like that line. Take that out. That's not, your readers are, you have a lot of women readers, and women readers are not continue to read you if you're going to do that. So, of course, this guy is being stubborn about it, yet at the same time, I think he will ultimately listen, because of course we're right.
Did it take a while for that readers group to get to that point where they felt they could be completely honest?
Yeah, it took some people leaving. It's just finding the right. Some people leaving and some other people coming in to find the right group, because it was at one time sort of run by somebody who told us, and I'm kind of old to be run by anybody at this point, so I prefer more of a democratic situation, where we all have something to say about it.
We're all individuals, right?
That's right. And so, you do run into egos in the writing business, and lots of insecurity. Lots of writers who are insecure and sort of puff themselves up, and everybody has that self-doubter in your head about whatever you do. I doubt there's a person in the room that never doubts themselves. And when you put your writing out there into the world, you're really making yourself vulnerable, and you have to be tough, but hopefully it makes you a better writer in the end.
So do you feel like you can incorporate a fair number of things that you learned through writing your first book into your second book?
Oh yes, absolutely. Yep. And I've been doing chapter by. I wrote this second novel, and I let a couple people read it, and they were like, we need to get closer to your main character. Like, we don't know her. So I started writing her story from high school, 1974, which is when I graduated from high school, and using a lot of things that happened to me. Not exactly. I was a musician. She's an artist. But I kind of use that artistic thing. And so I've written this whole backstory, and I just got to see if I can get it to fit with the rest of the book. I know I'll have to make changes, but I feel like I really didn't know my character that well. And the best way to get to know a character is to just write, just get into their head and write,
So who do you like to read in your own free time in terms of fiction? And do you aspire to that type, or is it just you enjoy that writing but that's not?
Well, I love literary fiction. I love Barbara Kingsolver, and I just read a book called The Whalebone Theatre by Joanna Quinn. She's a British writer. It was absolutely beautiful, wonderful. I like Anna Quinlan. Oh gosh, so many writers. Margaret Atwood. So I love that kind of fiction, but sometimes I read a book like that and then I go back to my own writing and I think, oh, this is so far from that, So I would love to be able to write beautiful literary fiction, but I don't know if I will ever, get my writing to a place that I can do that. So that's the lofty goal, and mine's down here somewhere. But it's still enjoyed. I've gotten very good comments about the book. So
you never thought of incorporating your career, as a musician, as a teacher, that, bringing that story into your writing?
Yeah, no, I did have a couple of classroom scenes with Mary Ellen, the first writing of this, but that sort of got taken out by the first editor. It'd be interesting to go back and read my original version of this at 90,000 words and see what maybe I should have kept in there, but it's kind of
something else with
kind
of story.
Yeah, actually, I've done a lot of things in my life. I worked as an activities director in a nursing home for 6.5 years, and I have a lot of wonderful stories, wonderful people and funny characters that would make a great story, but I haven't really delved into that yet. Although my short story that I published in 2011 was about this woman and her aunt in the nursing home. And then I taught for many years. But I don't know, it's like I taught for over 30 years and I'm kind of done with that now. I like writing short stories. I feel like I'm pretty good at writing short stories. Like some people go, I can't condense it. I can't keep it to 6 pages or whatever. And I actually really like doing that, and I think I do it pretty well. So I have 3 published short stories. Another one's going to be in the fall edition of Quabbin Quills, which is a kind of local, set in Barrie and up there. So I have a story on that, and I do like to write stories, but you've got to figure out where you're going to put them, and you have to. A lot of these online literary magazines, you don't hear. It's like 4 months, and you can't. They don't want you to do simultaneous submissions, so you're waiting and you're waiting, and then you kind of lose energy for it, and it's like, oh yeah, it's there somewhere. So that part of writing is kind of a drag. So is the querying thing. I went through that twice, and when I decided to publish this, I said, no, I'm going to find a publisher on my own because I don't have the energy for this. You can send out 30 and get 2 people that actually want to read the whole manuscript, and you wait. Sometimes you wait 4 or 5 months, and if I was 22, it'd be a different story. I'd have plenty of time to wait, but now I kind of feel the press of time. I volunteer at the library in Spencer, and I'm shelving books. And I look at the stuff that's the stuff that's out there as the new fiction. And unless it's an established writer who's written several books, they do have those. But a lot of them, all the covers look exactly the same. They're set in Paris, or they're set in a library, or they're set in a bookstore. As a matter of fact, there's one called the Paris Library. There's one called the Paris Bookstore. So that became popular. So everybody's jumping on that bandwagon, and it's the same story with a few tweaks. And I don't even read them. I've read a couple, and I was like, okay, I'm done with that. So it's kind of frustrating seeing that these are the people that are getting published. I mean, not all of them. There are good books being published, but
Focus there on the covers, and we actually had an author, Margherita Barisi, who presented here a number of months ago, and she did a presentation on the artwork. Her background was in publishing. So she presented a very interesting take on that whole thing, and did a lot of comparative side-by-side stuff that really, told a lot of stories itself.
yeah.
It's actually available through the, thanks to the Southbridge Community TV, it's actually on our YouTube playlist.
Yeah, I'll check that. I did watch a few of them after you sent them to me, but I would like to see that. That would be interesting.
It's interesting because she honed in on that. She did talk about her book, but then her real presentation was about just like how she got the cover that she had.
I'm gonna do a newsletter, which will be not exactly a blog, but I haven't quite figured it out yet. But it will be something like that. So if you want to sign up for my newsletter, it would be, you could.
That I can do.
Okay, good.
Well, I'd like to thank you very much, Mary Anne, for coming today and for giving us this really interesting presentation. And we look forward to having your book available at the Jacob Edwards Library. And I'd like to thank the folks I haven't seen for ages who came today. This is wonderful. Really, this is exciting.
Thank you.
And thanks to Jim for being here from the Southbridge Community TV as well.
Yes.
So thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. I can give you my last.